All right, everybody, we'll get started with Hurricane Dorian. We're starting to see the outer bands reaching our coastline. These red boxes that you see down in the Pender County, Wilmington area are tornado warnings. We currently have one for southwest Onslow County. So we try to emphasize it throughout the week. The hurricane is more than just wind. We're certainly concerned with wind, especially coastal areas and really everywhere for sustained tropical storm force winds, but multiple threats today: storm surge, heavy rain, wind, and tornadoes. So the big message with that is for folks that stayed home, please make sure they have multiple ways to get warnings, because often these come up with a very short window. So we want them to have that information in terms of seeking shelter in an interior room if they are staying home. So right now the outer bands of Dorian well ahead of the storm. The actual center is off the South Carolina coastline. So we still have a ways to get through the day and the night into tomorrow. So just keep that in mind. So we'll get started with the briefing itself. This should all be in your email inbox. We sent this out a little bit later because we had some adjustments to make for storm surge. The biggest change with this briefing was to enhance the wording for storm surge with regards to the very rapid rise of water. We're talking specifically on the Sound and specifically Pamlico Sound, especially Soundside Outer Banks. So we're not talking Boat Sound and things like that. We're talking when the storm passes near Cape Lookout and then toward Cape Hatteras, all that water ahead of it is being pushed to the north and west, and it's going to slosh back toward the Outer Banks Sound side, and that's going to be a really rapid rise of water. For you folks in coastal areas, it's going to be a little slower progression as the storm approaches, but we're emphasizing the Sound side, Pamlico Sound side, because that could be a pretty quick rise of water. Here's the latest track. This is actually as of 5 o'clock. The new 8 o'clock advisory should be in. We zoomed in because the track is so quick once it leaves our coast during the day Friday and especially into the weekend. It was hard to even see North Carolina. So a lot of times we say don't focus on the skinny black line, but we're so close in. This track has really not changed the last couple of days. Up and near our coast, this is just the center of the storm. Please keep that in mind. And landfall somewhere near Cape Lookout and then up across the Outer Banks themselves. But that is just for the center of the storm. Look to the south, you can see that the wind field itself is much larger than just the center. This whole orange area are those hurricane force winds. So again, and then the lighter green shading, those are tropical storm force winds, extending out in this radius. So as that lifts north and east, again, inland areas will be impacted. So please keep that in mind. Our threat levels have not changed. Still high for surge, rainfall, and wind. A low threat for tornadoes, but it is there. It's not, as high as some of the other ones, but we do have that threat. And the biggest change with this slide is just that confidence. If you notice the last couple of days, our confidence arrow has just gone from left to right. So now that we're in the thick of things, that confidence is high. And that increased yesterday with the upgrade for the storm surge and hurricane warnings. Speaking of storm surge, again, water levels will rise very rapidly on the Sounds. We're talking specifically the Outer Banks Sound side as the storm passes itself. All that water that's pushed into these inland rivers and the western end of the Pamlico Sound will go back rapidly to the east, impacting the Sound side of the Outer Banks. We try to mention this when you see those values of storm surge, 4 to 7 feet, or whatever they may be, areas that are exposed to open water, you're going to have some larger breaking waves on top of that. So for some of you, that will act to enhance the surge in some areas. This is our storm surge flooding map. There's a reason we don't zoom into specific areas with that. You can do that on your own and see a little bit more detail. Please go ahead and do that as well. So again, the areas of greatest risk, we've got 4 to 7 feet from Surf City to Cape Lookout. Carl's just joining me. Carl, if you get a chance, can you just confirm the values, if they've gone up or not?
Yes, they have.
They have. Okay. So this is our briefing that we sent out. We talked to Jamie down at the Hurricane Center. So still 4 to 7 feet for surf.
Yep, 4 to 7 feet everywhere except the southern shore of the Pamlico Sound west of the Alligator River.
Okay. And up there it's still 4 to 6?
Sorry, the Albemarle Sound west of the Alligator River. Up there it's still 4 to 6. Yes.
Okay. So if you didn't hear that, 4 to 7 still Surf City to Cape Lookout. This is with the 8 a.m. advisory. That has not changed. North of Cape Lookout to Duck is 4 to 7
yes.
now. And then the Sound side and rivers are 4 to 7, but we're talking the Pamlico Sound itself, so the inland rivers, and the reason for that is really emphasizing this Soundside Outer Banks area and also down East Carteret County. Albemarle Sound is still 4 to 6. So some slight tweaks up to 7, and again, that's mainly for the Pamlico Sound, Soundside Outer Banks, and down east. The point of emphasis with this, it's a foot increase, but it's this water level rise, very rapid. We've mentioned this a couple times, again, particularly on the Soundside Outer Banks. Flooding rain threat, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Jameson. She's joined us. Not a lot of changes. I'll have her speak more to that, and then she'll toss it back to me. We'll cover wind and tornado, and then Eric Seymour will talk a little bit more about our northeast counties for North Carolina.
Okay, thank you, Eric. All right, everyone, when it comes to the flooding rain threat, basically things have stayed pretty consistent with what we've been advertising the last couple days. We are still looking at probably a pretty good flash flood potential across the entire area. Today you're going to see increasing rain chances, but it's going to be more kind of hit and miss. As we get into the overnight hours, be prepared for very heavy rainfall as the storm approaches. We're likely to see, anywhere from 1 to possibly 5 inches in a couple hours. So it's really going to increase in intensity as we get to the overnight and into early Friday. And then as the storm moves up to the northeast, we're going to eventually see that rain get cut off. In fact, we're going to see some clearing fairly rapidly on the back side of this thing. But keep in mind that flooding can continue even once the rain stops. So looking at the impacts, initially we're going to have the flash flooding. I think that's going to probably be the more impactful flood threat that we're going to be facing apart from the storm surge. For rivers, we're still looking at our larger main stem rivers, the Tar and the Neuse, staying in the minor category in the coastal plains area. There could be some influence from the storm surge. The way it's looking at this moment is the storm surge is going to come in earlier than the freshwater response. So that means that you may see a little bit of a rise initially with the storm surge. That should recede on the backside of the hurricane, at least at the mouths of the rivers, and then the freshwater response will happen. So at this point, we're still expecting minor to moderate conditions on our larger main stem rivers, Trent, Neuse, and maybe, now that does exclude the Cape Fear. That's more under the gun for some heavier rainfall. The plot we have here with the rainfall amount shows a heavier swath kind of right along into the north of the track. That could easily shift. We're not exactly sure where that's going to be. I would say everybody's vulnerable to seeing up to 15 inches of rainfall, which of course will exacerbate the risk of any small streams and creeks. I think that's really going to be where we're going to see any kind of major flooding, is more in the smaller tributaries. Now the Trent River, which is under the gun for that 10 to 15, closer to the track, and potentially having the influence of storm surge, is probably the most vulnerable to potentially seeing major flood impacts. But we're going to continue to monitor things, and we'll notify you guys if we see any change.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much for that. As far as wind goes, most likely time of arrival, it's approaching. We expect this to really spread northeast across our area. So from this afternoon, the southern part of our forecast area, and up across the Outer Banks overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. The point of emphasis with this, a period of at least 12 to 18 hours for everyone. Tropical storm force winds, that includes inland areas, Green Hill, Snow Hill, so even inland. Again, impacts occur well away from the center. This is a big wind field. And then down by the coast, 24 hours or so in terms of tropical storm force winds. For your local area, refer to our website and that hourly weather graphic, which David did a great job hyperlinking here on the bottom. That's an excellent resource for specific timing of wind in your area. Highest threat, again, along the coast, but still a threat inland, especially tropical storm force winds farther inland. This is our maximum sustained wind. It has not changed much, just highlighting sustained winds above 40 miles per hour inland. We could see some sustained hurricane force winds, again, primarily along the coast itself, southern Onslow, Carteret County through the Outer Banks. The best chance for sustained hurricane force winds would occur there. As far as gusts go, still, 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts inland. If we're going to see gusts over 90 miles per hour, the best chance for that would be down along the coast itself. So again, highest risk for wind would be there. And just, I know the numbers jump off the screen. The big focus is the widespread nature of the wind more than the magnitude. Some of these values may be a little bit on the high side, What I want to gather is that the sustained tropical storm force winds are going to last long enough that we will have large areas without power here across eastern North Carolina. Last but not least, it's been an active morning for the Wilmington office, and then just getting into our office. This is the lowest threat of everything, but it is still a threat. Tornadoes. We have a tornado watch up for all the areas shaded in yellow through this evening. What that will do, a couple of locations that see these tornadoes may have isolated damage that's worse than what we have with Dorian. So keep that in mind. The big emphasis with that, with Dorian, is have multiple ways to get those warnings because you'll have a small window for them to take place. So confidence is high, life-threatening storm surge, and the main emphasis, very rapid rise of water, especially on the sound side Outer Banks. As Dorian approaches, it will be more of a gradual rise for places like Bogue Banks and the oceanfront areas. That rapid rise is more as the storm departs to the north and east, and we see that wind shift around to the northwest.